My name's Lesley Riddoch. I'm really chuffed to be here. You may or may not know, my folk, I'm sorry to say this to you, are from Wick. You like to say that first? Huh? Me too. Okay, right, fine. So, actually, it was coming up, just to be precise, I'm making a film about the clearances of Strathnaver at the moment. And so, you know, everybody's talking about where they came from, and very specifically where they came from, or cleared from. And so it made me start to think about me, you know, because you can hear from the accent, I was brought up in Belfast, but, you know, Wicker, mother, and so on. So I swung in past Sarclip, which I think is the memorial home today, to see the vast nothingness of Sarclip Harbour. You know, it was tough, wasn't it? And in a funny kind of way, you know, there's relationships between everything in Scotland and, I think, our small Nordic neighbours. Finland, perhaps, well, it always seems more than most, each country, but Finland, by gum, these guys didn't have their troubles to seek. If anybody thinks they've had a hard time in life, watch the Finns. I mean, we made this film, and actually we couldn't include all the problems they'd had because it would take too long. They had two famines in there that were worse than the Irish famines, and we didn't have time to do it. You know, and actually it would be too miserable, because then you'd have to also handle a civil war, 2 actual wars, occupation. These guys have had a lot to deal with, and they are the world's happiest country for 9 years running. And if any of you have been to, has anyone been to Finland? Right. Well, you'll know that they're not exactly slap my thigh, laughing people, you know. They're pretty kind of, they've got a slightly gloomy demeanour, which might not be that surprising given the past. So it's not a kind of like, you know, hey everybody, let's have a big laugh kind of happiness. It's satisfaction and it's trust. And actually this film is just to say that it starts perhaps in a strange-ish way. I made this film with a young chap, Gavin Hannigan, who's from Inverness. He's working out in Helsinki, and he got in touch with me after he'd seen a film about Denmark and said, why don't we make one about Finland? So I thought, yep, fine. It was quite a strange thing to arrive in Helsinki and think, well, I recognise him actually, because, you know, we had not met till we, you know, came to do the film. But so anyway, Gavin is a gentle soul in lots of ways. He's unusual because he plays in a punk band, and I feel that I must say, as my mother would say at this point, by his own way, because I kind of do say to him, if you're not covered in spit from your head to your feet, are you really a punk band? You know, in the old way of it. But anyway, so he's a modern punk band, and as you'll see, his punk band also play brilliant traditional music. And they're not sort of, you know, sniffy about it. Everybody's really, really into their own traditional music as well. But we start off in a forest, because Gavin had this thing that he wanted to show that I could feed squirrels from my hand. And I kind of thought, well, that would be good crack, for sure, but why are we doing it? But he was very keen that we did do it, and it's one of these things that it's only with hindsight that you realise what it's demonstrating is that if you are patient enough, you can build trust. And when you build trust, you're in another country. And that's basically, that's that film, really, the whole moral of it. The opposite is also true. When you don't have the patience to try and develop trust and just steamroller over everything, you become a country that's unable to do lots of straightforward things that these happy people are able to do. So, are there any, just finally, any teachers in the room that want to say they're teachers? Does anyone want to kite? Okay, there's probably secret teachers here, fat Kens, but that's one of the most striking things, because obviously these guys are pretty much at the top of the pizza charts, and they've got the world's happiest teenagers, yada, yada, yada. And the point is, how do you do this? So that's what the film looks at a lot. So anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Do put any, you know, questions building in your head, hint your lugs, and we can have a question and answer session at the end. I should just say thanks so much to Ian and Mary, particularly, for getting all of this together. As ever, she is a one-woman whirlwind for this place. So, okay, so anyway, Graham, take it away.
It's all right. It's okay, we won. So,
Here I am in Helsinki in a forest with a squirrel, and actually this forest is in the city, which is one of the reasons that probably Helsinki is one of the most popular cities in Europe with the most satisfied citizens. Of course, their education system is world-beating, their longevity is longer than the UK. And all of these achievements are made the more extraordinary by the fact that Finland has had to cope with wars, civil wars, famine, an ice-locked country for much of the year, and of course the constant presence of Russia as a neighbour. So our question here today is, how on earth do they do it? Well, patience and trust are huge factors in Finland's success, as the wildlife here kind of demonstrates. But there's something else too.
Sisu. It's a word that has no direct translation into English from Finnish, but it's something that factors into everything to do with Finnish living and the way they organise things.
This is Gavin Hannigan, a Scottish filmmaker from Inverness who's been living and working here for nearly 5 years. Our Finnish secret weapon.
One definition of sisu is determination, and there's the determination to make sensible and hard decisions at the same time that you'll find everywhere in Finland.
Well, let's go then.
Yes, I'll grab the cameras. Are you okay to do the questions?
Totally.
And I think we just stop feeding these things. They'll get too fat for winter. Do you actually have saunas on board here?
Of course, all the icebreakers have saunas.
We give them the freedom to love their profession.
We see how capable the Finns are. Do you think the Scots are as capable as that?
Oh yes. I made myself a big promise.
Hurra hukka, hei siellä Mannakorven mailla, siellä ei enää tiputeta pontikkaa.
This is Suomenlinna, perhaps a strange place to start our story of trust, sisu and determination. It's a World Heritage Site, 10 minutes by ferry from Helsinki. The Swedes built a fortress here on 6 barren islands when they owned Finland centuries back to fend off neighbouring Russia. It didn't work. The Russians seized Finland, along with this Gibraltar of the north, and built a massive dry dock, the biggest in the world. Soldiers were imprisoned here after the civil war that followed independence. But today, Suomenlinna is Finland's #1 tourist attraction and an open prison with the full backing of 900 island residents.
When the new residents come to live in Suomenlinna, they are always something a little bit afraid. And then they noticed that they have lived here many months or many years, and they have never noticed who are these prisoners.
Yeah.
They come to a shop in Monday evenings, Thursday evenings, and they go to a library in Wednesdays, but you don't. They use their civil clothing so that you actually don't know who they are.
Prisoners train as stonemasons and help keep the islands afloat with constant repairs, for which they are paid. Wives and partners can visit and stay overnight, and there is no negative media or alarmism. Suomenlinna is a tourist haven and a prison island because that just makes sense. And Finns have the knack of making sensible things work.
It's a disaster if something happens and they have to leave the houses where they are living in the end of this island. If they go away, it's a pity. Yeah, we don't vote for that.
This relaxed public attitude means community sentencing can actually work. So Finland has the same crime rate as Scotland, but just 1/3 of the prison population and much, much lower prison costs. There's an endless set of jobs here, and it makes such sense to have prisoners who are trained as stonemasons to fix it all. You know, it's just, but I have a horrible feeling societies like Britain and maybe other ones just wouldn't be able to put those things together.
Speaking of very humble and quiet solutions, that's the church that's on Suomenlinna. But if you look at the very top, it's glass, because it's also a lighthouse.
Oh, yes.
As we go through this adventure through Finland, I think you'll find all these little tiny subtleties, but it's just things that people nod and say, yeah, of course.
Actually, across on the mainland, there's a different way of helping people. It's called Housing First.
and it could potentially eradicate homelessness in Finland, which is mind-blowing. So let's go and see Juha, who knows all about it.
Here's a wee science bit. Scotland has 53,000 on the homeless register. Finland has 3,000, same population. There were 2,000 homeless shelter beds in Helsinki, now just 200. All because of a decision 20 years ago to house people with addiction problems with proper support first, before they quit their habits.
We have made some studies, and there has been many studies made around Europe as well, and they all have the same conclusion, that the savings are 5,000 to 15,000 euros per person per year when you actually house them with the support they need, compared that they would be going around the streets, shelter, temporary accommodation, back on the streets. So there is this cost-effective side of the work as well.
See, that's amazing, because I suppose people do have chaotic lives, but you kind of imagine that's their problem. But it puts a lot of stress actually on emergency situations then, on services.
Exactly, that's so true. And a couple of weeks ago I was in Canada, in city of Toronto, and one of the former homeless people, they shared their stories with me. And one of the guys, when he was living on the streets, he went into the emergency services 200 times a year. So you can imagine that's a quite a big threshold for the hospitals as well. And now he has been living in his own apartment for 7 months with the support he needs. He has been in a hospital once. So there's a huge difference. And of course, like you said, housing should be a human right. But then again, there is also the other side when it comes to economics, and it's actually saving money.
But that means you've got to be building.
Yeah, well, I think in Finland we have been in a lucky situation that we have been building affordable state-subsidized housing for the past 70 years. So there is a long tradition, unlike in UK, Canada and some other countries where they stopped building affordable housing in the early 90s. And now you can see the consequences in those countries where there can be tents and encampments and things like that. And in Finland, we have been doing the work quite well. But then when we started with the housing first 2008, we renovate almost all the shelters and temporary accommodation into these housing first units, which means that there can be, let's say, 50 apartments on a single-site building, and then there's the support downstairs 24/7.
And a community.
And what we have developed is the low threshold work activities, which has been a game changer. And that's the feedback we have gotten from the tenants, meaning that Monday to Friday, 5 days a week, 6 hours a day, you can participate in the work activities, and you get a little bit of extra money when you actually do it. And many people, first thing in the morning, they don't have a choice. They start drinking or using drugs, but now they have a choice. They can go do some work, and the work is literally downstairs. When we actually take care of the most vulnerable people in the societies, it's the right thing to do. It will save us money in the long run, but we will build better cities for everyone, meaning that the cities are more safer, more beautiful, good places to live, each and every one of us. And I think that was a quite genius way to communicate the change into public as well, that, we are doing this for everyone.
It's just like everything here, it just makes so much sense when you explain it that way.
Here.
Why are we not doing this? Why is everyone not doing this? Why are other countries not doing this?
There is not real political will to do it. Sometimes I wonder why, because like we have discussed here, there are so many benefits for each and every part who are on the same table. So I always argue that it's a win-win-win. So why aren't we doing it?
That's such a good point. I almost forgot the big question.
So are you going to end homelessness?
We'll see. Of course, we have our own challenges at the moment. And actually for last year, first time in 12 years, the number of homeless people went up a little bit. And then, the government has made some decisions that are challenging our work, and we'll see what happens in the future. But the big goal, of course, is to end homelessness in Finland. And then by 2030 or by 2035, I don't know, but it will be done, that I can guarantee.
I believe you.
I made myself a big promise.
But Finns tend to fulfil their big promises. 10 years ago, the government promised to celebrate the country's centenary by building the world's best library. Yep, the Finns are crazy about heavy metal, but crazier about libraries. They are Europe's biggest users. So, Oddi is a world first, and if Gavin could live here, I think he would.
One of the cutest parts is everything on this floor that isn't quiet, and it's got weird things going on. So for example, here's some 3D printers that are free to use as long as you pay for the filament. And here we can see some of the creations that people make out of wood. There's some sewn together bags. We can learn to make a Moomin bag. Look, for 10 euros you get the materials to make a Moomin bag. You've got color accurate tablets in which you can do animation and editing and decent workhorse computers, so you're not limited by what laptop you have at home. We have instrument selection here. Directly next door is the electronic music studio. And sadly the lights aren't on, but you can just about see the lights coming off a set of CDJs. You'll see a lot of things that you can use for commercial purposes here in Audi. But one of the prime parts of Audi as a concept is that if you're coming here, you're not using this place as a business, it's purely for you to expand your mind and experience things. So you've got a lot of access to do amazing things, but please don't make this your office, is the only requirement they have. I took my nephew around Finland, and his favourite thing is coming here to play Mario, because sadly he's of a generation that never had a SNES, but here's one right there. So we can come in and play old Mario, as he calls it. If there's a board game I really want to play with my partner, I will go onto the Helmet website and order it to here, and I just sit on the carpet and play here. Because this functions more as the city's living room than the place for people to be quiet and learn things. This is where events and music spaces happen, and this is a part of the city where even if you've got kids and you want to meet up with your friends and have a coffee, well, the coffee's there and the kids' play area is over there. So I'd like you to meet Vera, one of the robot librarians. So you can see that she's doing her task very diligently, in which she wants to go and deliver books. Kiitoksia, Vera. Hey, hey.
Yep, Audi is amazing. It's a jewel in the crown for a country without crowns, palaces or monarchs. So the really special places in Finland are public spaces.
There's no kings, there's no castles, there's no privatised spaces. So that's a great thing, but actually the biggest sort of civic statement is an education system that's still probably the best in the world.
Yes, and in fact another definition of CISO is courage. There was a bit of a problem where Finland had to look at itself and think, do I want to be a museum or do I want to modernise?
They had the courage to kind of let children just be far more active in the classroom, have far more participation, and believe that every kid could learn potentially everything.
Yes.
So let's go and see how this works.
Finland's education system is the envy of the world. It's the most literate country with the second lowest child inequality, third happiest teenagers, and usually the best PISA exam results. Yet, Finns also have the shortest school days and the lowest face time between teachers and pupils. What's the secret? Well, Duola Primary runs itself. Teachers aren't looking over their shoulders or spending hours on paperwork for someone else. They teach, learn from colleagues, and work non-stop to make school interesting and fun.
The sewing machine driver's license test, where you show that you can use the machine and you can turn around and you can use all the equipment.
Yes, yes, the different stitches.
Yeah.
Nobody's worried about their little fingers.
No, because they are careful.
They are careful and they are taught not to put
Yes,
the fingers
yes.
there.
Yes, I know.
Yes.
You've decided as a school that you want everybody at this age to be learning this.
It's not the school, it's the national curriculum.
Oh, it is the whole of Finland.
And then you must visit this
Right.
other class.
Now the children are cleaning up all the places they've been working for 2 hours.
Right.
And now these are children which are the same age as on the other group.
Unbelievably, the teacher's asking who wants to stay and finish up cleaning up. And he's choosing who gets to do that work. They all want to do it. Wow.
So never mind the 3 R's, they'll get taught anyway. What the state makes primary kids learn is practical and collaborative. How to operate a sewing machine, use a saw safely, and play every instrument in a band. And to make sure there's no hogging, they change instruments and start again. How come these children are so cooperative? Well, they get 6 to 8 week modules, not a huge long school term. They choose a third of what they do. Schools are relatively small and intimate, and most kids use special educational support, not a stigmatised minority. But there's another big difference. They start school at 7.
In Britain and Scotland, children start school at 4 and 5.
That's really early.
Yes.
Compared to Finland.
So what difference, what advantage do you have as primary teachers having kids that have come through a kindergarten stage and preschool?
It usually helps a lot. They've all gone through the same system of preschool in Finland, where they sort of get some basic skills, and most of them are very ready to start school when they get here. So they sort of know how to behave in a group and how a day can be structured.
So it's those sorts of things. They're not reading and writing?
Not usually, unless they've sort of picked it up somehow.
Yes, quite many actually do.
Yeah, they do.
But not all of them.
And I guess they learn to listen to instructions and ask questions when they don't understand, and these kind of things, like how do you function in a group?
Also skills like maybe even how to cope with disappointments and...
Yeah, emotional skills.
Yeah.
And we do teach that at school as well.
You teach that?
Yeah.
How do you teach coping with disappointment? Please tell me, I want to know.
Well, it's always like whenever these sort of situations happen, and they do, especially when you play games in a classroom, people are going to get upset. And then we always talk about it. Like, even for my language classes, if we do an online game and somebody really gets heated up and upset that it didn't work out the way they wanted it to, then we just kind of like, at the end of the game, we discuss it. Like, what happened? Why did you feel that way? Are you okay to play this game again? And, you know, how do we cope with these feelings? And then we all talk about it with the kids.
And as I understand it, I mean, in the UK, there is a curriculum, an external curriculum that's exams at a certain time. You've got to do the test a certain way at the age of 5 even. You've been teaching 25 years and you've never done a national... More.
Yeah.
You don't look it, right? But anyway, 25 years and you've never done a national test. You've decided not to.
Well, there's no need to do those.
And it depends on the school.
I make them do tests, lots of tests really sometimes. But last week we had 2, this week already 1. But they are not too big, and they are more like rehearsing.
The point seems to be that it's to help you, the teachers here. You're running the show, and it's not to tell somebody way up in the Board of Education somewhere that you're okay as teachers.
No, we don't have to prove
we
that.
have pedagogical freedom.
Right.
And we're trusted to know what we're doing.
The word here is trust. As these are professionals, they do their professional work properly, and I can trust it. They don't write pages of planning that somebody would go through and see. They have their own planning and they share it with the colleagues. These are the differences. We have, freedom, but also which requires trust, and we have the trust.
It wasn't always like this. Finnish education was pretty so-so till comprehensives replaced selective schools with the peruskoulu, keeping kids together between 7 and 16. The new outlook can be summed up in 2 sentences. An education cannot be created by force, and primary teachers must be educated to the highest standard themselves.
In late 1970s, there was a kind of a wisdom and consensus that all our teachers need to hold master's degrees. That time was revolutionary. You know, the primary school teachers had to earn master's degree in a research university in order to teach 6-year-olds or 7-year-olds was something that nobody else was doing. If you have teachers who are not able to do that, you know, if you have particularly primary school teachers that you cannot trust their judgment. Obviously, you need external assessments and you need inspection. This one single decision that we did in the late 1970s has created this situation where we are right now, where we can trust our teachers to do many more things by themselves collectively than most other countries.
There's a lot of demand to be a teacher. It's not just whoever rocks up and you're just happy that someone wants to do it.
Yeah, I think young people here, but particularly those who are when they're in the high school, kind of a senior years in school, that when they look at what teachers do, that they realize that it is a kind of an independent, autonomous, respected knowledge work.
How would you characterize what, if you like, the Anglo-American model is, which is the different way of sort of almost forcing children through competition and testing and into an adversarial world? Why are we doing it?
I don't know why we're doing that, because there's a lot of evidence. The most recent evidence is really showing that it doesn't work. That the education systems that do what you said have experienced very visible and strong declines in many areas of performance, including students' engagement, their kind of a sense of belonging in the school. And in Finland, we try to really do everything we can. And when I say we, I mean teachers and authorities and parents as well, that learning is a right, or education is a right, if you wish. Whereas I think the Anglo-American model or global thinking is much more that learning is a children's duty.
And the Finns work hard to make sure education isn't suffered dutifully through gritted teeth. Their school leaving age is 19, one of the world's highest, so surly teenagers would abound if there wasn't a lot of choice, including excellent vocational colleges.
The reason why I chose vocational college is a little bit easier, because you get to go to internships, you're studying and working at the same time, so you're getting both experiences.
Personally, me, I'm pretty confident that I'm going to get my grades up and I'm going to go to high school next year. The school system in Finland is like brilliant, it's really good, so I'm not really worried. I think everything's going to go fine.
Cool. This is where the happy Finns come in, isn't it?
Oh yeah. We'd be happy right now because it's light outside, you see, but you come over here in December and it's dark, you're going to be like not really happy then, right?
But it's not just cold, dark and ice the Finns must deal with, it's their own history. Just over a century back, Finland almost ceased to exist. After centuries run by Sweden, then Moscow, independence came suddenly with the Russian Revolution in 1917. But celebrations didn't last long. We're off to Tampere, centre of the Workers' Army, the Reds, who wound up on Finland's losing side.
During the summer 1917, people started to organize it by themselves. So they created their own security guards and paramilitaries. And because of the political division, there were the Red Guards and there were the White Guards. And therefore we ended up in a military conflict in 1918.
So it's astonishing, because most times when there's independence, it's just happy, happy, happy for a small period of time. But it seems that very rapidly things became very split and moved into what was then a civil war.
Yeah, and of course, one of the important part was also that it was a war of amateurs. So all those people, like ordinary working people, ordinary farmers and so on, they got their rifles and they went to war without any previous military experience with each other. It was a question of these national things and independence and so on, but it was also a class war between the poor and the rich. About 40,000 people died during the war and in the prison camps after that. But there were 80,000 people on the camps. So we had first concentration camps here in Finland. There were very heavy sentences, death penalties, but there were also they were pardoned because the society could not have such a great amount of prisoners. The governments made kind of reforms just after the war. in all the municipalities there was the new elections, everybody could vote and so on. And people had to agree about their local issues. And somehow they find the way to do that. So it was kind of an economic thing. But on the other hand, there was also a foreign pressure. Western powers, especially UK, France, and for instance Sweden, they did not like what happened after the Civil War. They knew that there were this kind of horrible prison camps and put pressure on the Finnish government. The Germans took part in the war, and they had an idea that we would somehow become like a servant state for Germany.
Really?
Yes, exactly.
So you would jump from Sweden a long time ago, Russia, and then you would become a German client state.
Yeah.
You're like a plaything.
Yeah, and there were plenty of German troops in 1980 in Finland. That was somehow the incredible luck of Finland, but also in other Eastern European countries, that during the First World War, the Russia lost, and then the Germany lost, in this order. So that created the possibility for independence.
And that's how close it was. After World War I, Finland could have been swallowed up by any of Europe's great powers. And that danger reappeared when Russia's Red Army invaded in 1939. Regardless of divisions during the Civil War, 1 in 10 Finns immediately joined their army, inhabiting forest dugouts in temperatures of -30 degrees. And they won, for a while. For Churchill, it was living proof of sisu, determination against impossible odds.
Most Finns didn't really expect the war really to break out. They thought that they are playing a game, Stalin is playing a game, they want something from us, we play along and let's see what comes out of it. But then this invasion really struck people by surprise. That was quite clear from the beginning of the Winter War that this is about the existence of the whole country. It was about the aggressive totalitarian country invading a democracy where people really felt that it's their country, even if they had been on the losing side on the Civil War. It was an extreme war in many ways, and it was also an extremely intense war. It lasted only for 3.5 months, so it was relatively short. The main thing for the Finnish population at large was to take back those territories that were lost in the Winter War. About 10% of the Finnish areas and territories, and about 10% of the population had also lost their homes. They had been resettled in the rest of the country. Finland didn't have a political treaty with Germany, so we would have been like nominally allies. But all the operations and activities were planned with the German army in 1941. And Finland did its part in this Operation Barbarossa.
So basically, the Nazis lost, Finland lost, and then you were made to pay big style to Russia.
That's how this continuation war ended, so that Finland again lost those areas that it had lost. There were large war reparations Finland had to pay. And then also Finland had to drive away those German troops that were still in northern parts of the country, and there were really a huge amount of them. And that was a time when almost whole of Lapland was burned down, all the villages and houses and bridges were destroyed.
So Finland had 1 war against Germany, 2 against Russia, and a massive reparations bill, which the Finns had to pay in cash and kind. Russia took Finland's ships, including its icebreakers. Disastrous for the Finns, since its ports are ice-locked for half of the year. Still, in the topsy-turvy way of Finland, that became another stroke of good luck. Forced to rebuild fast, they became the shipbuilding kings they are today, producing half the world's icebreakers and designing most of the rest.
So, do you actually have saunas on board here?
Of course, all the icebreakers have saunas.
So it's like a cruise icebreaker?
Yeah, yes, but the crew stays here for 10 days when they are on board working. So that's why it has to be a bit comfortable.
Yeah.
First of all, the people who work here on this company and in every company, they are of course the most valuable asset for the company, because if the people aren't motivated and happy in their work, they would leave. And that's what we are worried about. We want to keep them here and make working fun. Maybe that's one of the reasons why Finland is the happiest nation in the whole world for how many years in a row? I don't know, 7?
Well, 7.
At least
Stop
5.
counting. Right.
Yeah.
It obviously makes sense that if you make the workplace fun and equal in the society, then people are just going to feel happier and they're going to keep. I mean, it's so obvious. Why does nobody else get it?
I don't know. I don't have the answer.
But we do have the evidence. Finland's topped the world's happiness charts for 8 years running. It is in the top 10 for income equality, and despite being a similar population size to Scotland, has half the child poverty. And in the Global Reputation Index, Finland is 5th, while Trump's America has dropped to 48th. Jukka says he doesn't have an answer for happiness, but he does have an answer for how a small, cold, remote country actually keeps itself going. Icebreakers create ice-free passages for cargo convoys, keeping food, fuel and supplies moving whatever the weather. And Polaris, with 360-degree thrusters, is the most modern in the fleet.
Let's say that after World War II, we had a President Paasikivi, and he said that, stated that there's nothing what we can do for geography. We still have Russians in a neighbor, and then wintertime all our ports might be frozen. So what can we do? So this is how we should live here. After the peace negotiations, they were actually performed by England and the Soviet Union. And Finland was not accepted to those negotiations at all. And so we had to give them, the Russians, for example, 500 vessels and 330,000 trains full of all kind of things from Finland. It was a hard job for our grandparents, but on the other hand, we knew how to make trains, vessels, icebreakers, etc. So, and that gave also a lot of work for those men who came from the war. I don't know if this is common knowledge, but Finland was the only country in the world who paid all these reparations.
Yes.
And so actually everything was paid in 1952, so it took only 7 years.
So essentially losing the war and having to pay the Soviet Union helped create the modern Finland.
Yeah, you can say so, yes. Okay, even if the Russians didn't conquer any land of Finland, we still had to have to give them 12% of Finnish land base. And although, as you know, there were only 3 European capital cities, London, Moscow and Helsinki, which were not invaded.
Is that quite important to you?
It is, yes.
Why?
Well, it makes 10 centimeters higher.
And with a $6 billion deal just signed with the United States to supply and design icebreakers, the whole Finnish economy is sitting a bit higher today.
So I'm trying to understand this. You're on this big boat and you're helping these little ones just by your side thrusters.
Yes, it's azimuth thrusters, and one of the makers is Atsipod.
In Finland?
In Finland, yes. It's ABB which makes those, but also in Rauma we have, for example, Steerprop, which makes 360 degrees azimuth propellers.
So basically, because you need the icebreakers, because of the ice, and because you need this capacity for the 360 degrees, you've got jobs then making those propellers.
Yeah, and that's why we have a lot of industrialized, lot of companies. Normally still comes from Luleå from Sweden.
So you're okay with Sweden now?
Oh yes, we are 363 days. They are our best friends, but those 2 days, Olympics and ice hockey, then we are enemies.
Okay. And you come...
It's like Scotland and England, you know. But we are 363 days, we are best friends.
But Finns are definitely not best friends with their other neighbour, Russia. They made big money from Soviet contracts and stayed neutral and outside NATO for decades to placate the mighty bear. But the invasion of Ukraine changed everything.
It was really almost as if people changed their mind overnight. So for the Finnish population, joining NATO or before that staying neutral, they were really policies of preserving independence and preserving one's ability to stay outside of conflicts. But I think if you compare Finland to Denmark or Sweden or Norway, there is this feeling in Finland, maybe because of these great crises, the Great Famine, the wars, the Civil War, the Second World War, the economic collapses, that you can never be sure that something really, just around the corner, there might be something bad waiting for you. Even if things have been continuing quite fine for quite some time for most of the population. So.
But that also explains, I mean, you didn't take a peace dividend then when the Berlin Wall collapsed. You just kept spending on preparedness, which is kind of, I'm only coming to terms with how enormous that is, with underground bunkers, with car parks everywhere that can be bunkers, with...
Actually, I think we are on top of a bunker at the very moment.
Really? Okay.
I think there's an entry there, and this hill, like many hills in Finnish cities, they are hollow, yeah, so that you can get in. Something can always happen in Moscow, in Leningrad, in St. Petersburg, that will turn things to another angle, and then at that point we have to be prepared for those things to happen. I don't think that the Finns are really the happiest people on earth, but what we can say is that when they have been measuring these levels of trust in the society, the Finns are really faring very well. They might even be on top of the estimations or the calculations, because Finns really do have a high level of trust on other people in the society, but also on the state and the society as a whole.
So did you spend time in the military yourself?
I did my military service already in 1995 or 6. I was educated or trained to destroy tanks, but that's I wouldn't be too confident on that skill anymore. So.
Right. It's such a strange thing, because you're a historian, you're interested in your own country's history, you're interested in the gentler things in life, you've got a bicycle, and you destroy tanks.
Well, yes. Luckily I haven't been doing that really, but I was trained to destroy tanks, yeah.
That's what we call in English a sheepish grin.
Okay.
Well, we're on the train back to Helsinki. That was kind of quite mind-blowing in Tampere, not just realising that we were indeed standing on a bunker. I mean, he is a tank?
Anti-tank infantryman.
Anti-tank infantryman, and such a gentle guy. But you can top that because...
Because I have an entire band full of conscripts. It's been very odd for me, at least, performing in a punk band in Helsinki where the entire cast on stage is a military outfit. And on the topic of that, I think we need to speak to Heikki.
Something we take for granted, build weapons, fly drones and stuff like that. So everybody has their own speciality, but it's not something we really think about. And then I would be working in the propaganda department. It's like when we walk past like the rooms marked with the triangles, showcasing that it's a bunker behind that door. Maybe something in the like collective mentality of Finnish people. It's not something we think about, but we are ready if something would happen. Even without the sense of like nationalism, we have like this sense of pride of our own culture and our language and our nature especially. And I think that's something that unifies everybody in Finland.
Which is why Finns accept an incredible amount of war preparedness. There's conscription for men with female volunteers and a whole industry producing and checking massive stockpiles of food, medicine, and vitamin D. Finland started fortifying foodstuffs 20 years ago, and now levels of vitamin D are nearly twice that of the average Scot. It all means Finland will keep going in the event of attack. There's a bunker space for everyone in the country, and each workplace, block of flats, and new building must have its own bomb shelter, all overseen by the Director for Preparedness.
Every shelter or bunker, whatever you want to call them, they have dual use. So they are used as, for example, storage space, or larger ones, they might be swimming halls, metro stations or something. And then we are quite certain that there will be pre-warning or pre-alerting, and then we have 72 hours to make the shelter ready. So you have to take, if it's your own personal storage or something.
Okay, swimming pools. How are you take all the water out of the swimming pool?
Well, some of the swimming holes, they are. We have quite good bedrock shelter in Finland, and they are in the bedrock shelter, the swimming holes. Everything we do, we try to combine these needs and think how to make it smart.
And are you capable of defending yourself against Russia?
Of course, I'm very assured.
Besides very assured people, Finland's greatest defence is forest, which covers 70% of the land on its long Russian border, hard for tanks to negotiate. Trees are also commercially valuable. Finnish wood pulp produced newsprint for the European newspaper industry last century, lifting millions of Finns from grinding poverty. But trees also have spiritual meaning. The legendary shyness of Finnish people may spring from centuries isolated in forests with only trees for company. People shared images of their family special trees with the authors of Tree People, and photographers Ritva and Sani went out to find them, helping trace the myths and place names that have tied Finns to their forests since the Ice Age.
One of the things that was fascinating about the book that you did with Ritva, for example, a sacrificial tree, so that the tree actually took care of you.
Well, the idea is that, for example, if we would build a house there, we select what could be our sacrificial tree. Maybe this one, it's a big enough, or maybe we plant a tree and it will be our sacrificial tree for the rest of our life. And then the tree is it's part of your important things in your family. For example, if the baby borns, you go to show the baby to the tree. The first things for the harvest, for example, you put on the tree. So the tree is part of the family's life. And you can pray that the tree gives your good luck and helps you in many things and protects you. Hei, linnut, tulkaapas. Täällä olisi teille pähkinöitä.
Finland, it's got loads. I mean, I can't remember what the proportion of forest cover is, but it must be around 80, more than 80%.
Yeah.
So you think, gosh, these guys are doing their stuff for the environment. They've got trees. You know, it's very green.
Yeah, that's very sad, and that's very sad that people can't see what is the real forest and what is economical forest, because these plantations are all around us. So I swear that once you go to the natural forest, you really notice the difference, but that most of the people doesn't have anymore. So more than 90% of our forest is under the heavy economical use, and about half of our forest is under 60 years old. In a natural forest, there is all the time there are small plants, there are old plants, there is everything in between. When you cut it, most of the biggest part of the biodiversity on the ground will die immediately. This old forest, here is where our ancestors come. So we understood that if there is some kind of, for example, the big church in the city, in the center of the Helsinki, so it is part of our culture. We are saving it, we will not destroy it. But what about the old forest? But why it could be, for example, this? Why there's a plan to build the houses? Why can't we think that it's a very very economically productive place for health and for many things.
How to have a profitable timber industry but still maintain natural woodlands is a tricky balance for any country to strike. But Finland is not just one big forest, it's also the world's most cooperative country. Co-ops explain why Finland also tops the world charts for food security. Supplies are not just homegrown, they're home-owned. A Nobel Prize winner once said, "Finland has no Rockefellers or Carnegies, we have cooperatives." Including this one, the OP Bank, founded in the 1900s, when political activity was banned and co-ops were the only way for Finns to organise.
We were still under the Russian rule until our independence in 1917. So it was forbidden to gather openly. So it was a way to organize economically, and that was not forbidden. For instance, dairy cooperatives and meat cooperatives were established in order to gather together so-called negotiation bargaining power, and they could send their milk or meat directly to the cooperative, which was owned by themselves. The number of membership is up to 7.9 million memberships, and we have 5.5 million people in Finland.
Okay.
So quite many memberships.
Yeah.
And they pay taxes approximately 800 million euros each year. Additionally, they invest in Finland 2 billion euros each year. They have invested in renewable energy, solar panels, wind energy, and so on.
I went cycling around the Åland Islands and was astonished that almost everything that we'd done was cooperative. You know, we'd stayed in a cooperative hotel. The farmers we met on the ferry were going to a cooperatively owned abattoir. We were on a cooperatively owned ferry. It was astonishing to me.
That is a very good example. Åland Island is actually a miniature of Finland. All those examples you mentioned, they also exist here on the continental Finland. This is a big threat these days that the service, the shop, or any kind of service, it just fades away. And oftentimes the reason is that the owners are faceless. They live far away, abroad, somewhere out there. But as cooperatives are local communities, their operational area is regional, and that it won't cheat you, for instance. It is said in the research that one of the best benefits of the cooperative model is that when it grows big enough, it begins to correct the market.
Persuading everyone to play nice. That could also be the secret of Helsinki Council's success. Helsinki is the most remote European capital city with the least winter daylight, the hardest to learn language, and yet the most satisfied residents. Why? In Finland, it seems people genuinely come first. I've known Heikki Mäntymäki for 20 years, since he first showed me round an old port area. The council had decided to move the harbour out of town to free up 20 kilometres of prime waterfront for affordable housing. Why? Because they thought it was important for citizens to be near the sea for views, walks, mental health and swimming. Right, I thought, that'll never happen. No council would shift heaven, earth and all the hardware of a port just to make its people happier. I was so wrong. And once the council had shifted one port, they just kept going.
We do have 3 or 4 very large scale, like this Kalastama area. Another one is West Harbour, and then we have this Kruudunvuorenranta area in the island of Laajasalo, which used to be an oil harbour. And then we have maybe Hernesaari, but it's still under planning. It's not under construction, but under construction we have at least 3 large former harbour areas.
No wonder Heikki and planning chief Pasi Rajala are proud to show off the changes. The first relocated harbour is away beyond that elegant looking bridge, and it's car and truck free as planned despite fierce protest, leaving this lovely area for genuinely mixed housing.
When you go to cities that have this kind of beautiful new waterfront, it gets gentrified. Does that word get translated?
Yes.
And so it's, you know, people who are key workers, nurses, teachers, people who work in the shops, they can't afford to live here anymore. Have you avoided that?
Well, through social housing, of course.
But like here, is any of this that we're seeing social housing?
Yeah. I don't know which ones, but you cannot see it.
You cannot see it. That's the main point, that you cannot see. You cannot say that this is social housing, this is owner-occupied housing.
And that move was possible because Helsinki Council owns 66% of the land. They never sold off green space, so today the councillor is developer, landowner and planner. It means good ideas actually happen, like vacuum collected rubbish.
How does this work?
You put, this is for bio-waste, this is for plastic and so on. You put it there and it's been sucked. So we have a pipeline that the trash is going through the pipeline and to a central area where it's being distributed.
And so you don't have lots of big, horrible, dirty bins with stuff on the road?
And we don't have the waste trucks that would otherwise be here all the time.
But excellent public services are not just for the new neighbourhoods. Most Helsinki residents have affordable district heating. There's a council map for urban fishing. And when the city population exploded 10 years ago, planners acted to prevent urban sprawl, encouraging flat owners to build up, not out. Why did people tolerate that level of disruption? Extra cash, more trams, and because it did make sense.
The people that are living there own their apartments, they own the company that...
They are the shareholders as well.
Yes. So if they are building more, they will get profit from it, the people that are living there.
So is it like each block is it like a little cooperative or something?
Yes.
Right,
yes.
okay.
Yes.
I see.
And if they, for example, have to make big renovations, they can provide money for that by building a bit more.
Oh, right. And then also you have said to some of them, and we'll put a tram line in.
Yes.
So there's another, okay, that's pretty good. It's like a bribe.
Yes. We can persuade them to build more by giving them possibilities.
Yeah. Okay. Again, it makes sense.
Helsinki never axed trams like go-ahead cities elsewhere, now spending millions to put them back in. But there's another big difference. In Britain, cash-strapped councils rely on central government. In Finland, it's the other way round.
Where do you get your money from? Does it come from central government to you, or do you raise it yourself?
No, municipal taxes.
We are giving money to the central government. Our money comes from the citizenship taxes, and also we are developing land. We own most of the land in Helsinki, and we are developing it and selling and renting it for companies. So that's a big income. And the central government is developing remote areas with our money.
It feels like everything here just it makes sense. It's reasonable, all of this.
No, it's just common sense.
So is having a council system where each party has a role in government with no one left outside in surly opposition.
I think it's an amazing thing that you've managed to, create so much new area in somewhere without excluding the people who might want to live here, and without excluding, key workers and young people and young families and things like that. And it doesn't seem to have been very difficult for you, was it?
No. I think it's kind of a Nordic tradition, not only Finland, but also in Sweden and Denmark.
So could we be doing better in Scotland, in Britain, everywhere else?
You can choose.
So, this is Finland, the happiest country despite the most difficult history. Best place to be a child, with excellent education and low child poverty. A land of icebreakers, saunas, cooperatives and bunkers in case of invasion. a country run by its neighbours for centuries that's created its own common sense approach to solving social problems. A different way of running a country in the face of all adversity. If anyone can teach resilience and determination, surely it's the unsinkable Finns.
Mannakorven mailla siellä paljon on tiputettu pontikkaa. Nyt kun meille koittanut on vapaan viinan aika, niin eihän ne pontikat enää meille maita hurraa hupha. Hei siellä Mannakorven mailla siellä ei enää tiputeta pontikkaa hurraa hupha. Hei siellä Mannakorven mailla siellä ei enää tiputeta pontikkaa.
The teachers' union, the teacher that represents primary teachers, actually took the decision themselves to require themselves to have master's degrees. And in audiences that have had more teachers, you know, I've asked, would you have done a master's degree to teach 7-year-olds? And actually, most people say, yeah, although, you know, at the moment you don't get funded to do it, you know, so that's the problem. You're saying absolutely. Are you a hidden teacher? You're an ex-teacher. Is that just the thing I didn't say when I was looking for all the teachers and you were quiet? I thought I'd gone through everything there. Well, so what did you reckon?
Well, the bit about education was just stunning, absolutely stunning. Why we don't do it like that? They won't let you, that's why. You know, we've tried. Teacher here, teacher there.
You're all teachers. They all tap to you at the start and you're right at the front as well. And you're just like, we'll just keep our powder dry here. So what did you all get up to, you gang then?
Well, I've done teaching from nursery right through to tertiary special needs. So I've gone through the whole system really, actually working in. So I just thought that was fantastic because the best way children learn is through play and through action and taking part and learning how to get on together. It makes a huge difference. They've got it right, absolutely right.
Because I keep getting wheeled into discussions and things like debate night and not question time, but anyway, and every edition of debate night has the same question: why is the behaviour of children in school gone completely apeshit? And I don't know, but
schools are for politicians, not for children.
But what I think is, looking at this, is that, and you know, we're the odd ones out because 82% of countries in the world send their kids to school at 6 and 7. And they didn't sit and have a big discussion about it, they just came to that conclusion from just watching when children can basically control their motor function and, you know, sit still essentially. So there's 18% of the countries in the world think 4 and 5 is a good idea. And apart from the Netherlands, which is utterly baffling to me because I'm usually pretty right on, it's Britain. It's Britain and all the former colonies of Britain that think, you know, do 4 and 5. And in a way, the reason for that is we had the first industrial revolution, had the first factory acts, wanted to put women in factories, so what were you going to do with the kids? And that's the only thing behind 4 and 5. There's no academic research behind it at all. So, you know, a big thing for Scotland is to start following the evidence, and the evidence is entirely 6 and 7. So every time I get stuck on a programme like this, I do rehearsal of this, and people are kind of like, oh, okay, but that feels like it's too complicated. You know, it's going to take too long. It's easier to just say we need more discipline now. And clearly it's not working. And that just fills you with this feeling of dread and hopelessness that, you know, there's just generations that are kind of running amok. And yet we're the only countries that are putting 5-year-olds in school. So, I don't know, it strikes me it could have something to do with it. And it could be
more engaged as well.
That's the other thing, yeah.
How many kids would stay behind, volunteer to stay behind to complete the classroom?
Yeah, that's why we did keep that in. When I noticed them doing that, I thought, wow. It was the other thing. The other thing, though, is if you look at the amount of, I mean, that bit where I say, what about the little fingers going in under the sewing machines? And the contempt of the teacher is fabulous. You know, they are careful, idiots, you know. But there was a film, we did a film about Denmark, and it was much the same, that the kids are just flying all over the place, really. And the teacher there said the same thing, that what children need is experience. It's experience. So, okay, within limits, you're trying to make sure they don't brain themselves falling out. I mean, in Norway, where they have outdoor kindergarten, the job for the teachers is to look at the trees they will obviously climb and then try to make sure there's no stump sticking out when they will obviously fall. And their motto is, children need small accidents. So all of this is sort of somehow, we've got, I think there's some profound things in this, which is that in a funny kind of way, although Finland and Scotland could look like they have some similarities, I think we're polar opposite. Because everything about Finland is grassroots, and it's basically control is in the professional, control is in the school, and control is in the local council. Now, here we are in the largest council on the planet. You know, not by population, but by size. So we've got 32 so-called local councils in Scotland. Finland has 310. It also has 20 county councils. So, you know, people that I was speaking to, this film is online, by the way, on my YouTube channel if you want to see it, you know, put it to anyone else. And there's a Finnish guy who's worked in Scotland who's on the end of it talking about this local bit because we didn't put it in the film. And he said, this is so where it's all at. You know, he said his parents live in a town of 10,000 people. What's Thurso? 7,000. Right. So, you know, Thurso size, and they run it. And so they're trusted to run it, they run it. It's like the school, they run it. And I'm afraid in Scotland, we are not trusted. You know, there's an apex predator at the top. You know, there's like 5 people in Edinburgh who don't really trust anybody else. So everything's about oversight. Everything's about paperwork. You've got to prove yourself to somebody you'll never meet. And actually in that respect, it's like feudalism. It's like the land ownership pattern actually being absorbed into the democracy. Because, well, it is. It is feudalism. And the thing is, people think that's something that, you know, ended with bloody Patrick Seller 200 years ago. But actually, this idea that there's a hierarchy and there's always someone more important and decisive than you, and they're never in the room, that is the key component, really, of every system that I can see, actually, in Scotland, and we're not fixing it. So I'm hoping that this will be shown in the new Parliament to the new MSPs, which I'm confident will go in one ear and out the other, actually, because it seems too difficult to change. But
I talked in Germany about 20 years ago, and that was the kids. You know, they were part of meetings. They chose the books. We made our own, you know, lessons. We didn't have to follow a certain curriculum, and it was a happy school. I mean, that's 20 odd years ago.
Right, gentleman behind you. Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. I imagine the retired teachers sitting in front of me may agree with this, but I found myself wondering, so what do the politicians in Finland actually do? Do they merely enable? Because it looks as though the people and the professionals actually run the country.
Yeah, well, you know, the Finns are actually having a wee bit of a wobble at the moment. I mean, all the Nordic countries have a stage where, mostly for 50 years, they've been social democracies that have been quite happy to keep their fairly high personal tax levels in the central kitty, so that it's kind of giving them great services and it's protecting the next generations. And one by one, all the Nordic countries have gone, or actually, could we just take a bit out of the kitty now? And they've looked at countries like us and thought, see, they do it. They just get lots of people to volunteer for things and don't pay them. Maybe we could do that. So they've all started to move that way. And then you could throw in, they've all got problems with immigration. There's a lot of problems with difference. And I mean, I'm not trying to excuse this, but Finland was a colony. It wasn't an empire owner. So Britain, in a way, had experience of other countries because we took them over. And we had a long-standing Commonwealth, and there was a mixture of people. I'm not saying we're not a racist society, but there was experience of difference. Nobody ever came out of a war-torn country and said, I think I want to go to Finland, you know, with all due respect to them. So there was no input, there was no immigration for a long, long time, until very recently. And it's been a right shock to the system, actually. So you can hear incredibly racist stuff being said by folk who are otherwise as right on as you'd like. So that has fueled a right-wing takeover of their government. You remember the guy at the beginning, you have from Housing First, who was saying we might not get to eliminate homelessness because of the government's given us some problems. You're damn right, actually. They've got the most far-right government they've had since the 1930s. So that's taking money out of a lot of public services. But even so, they see that as just a temporary blip. Because even with the most far-right government since the 1930s, nobody has done what Thatcher did, which was dismantle the state. So their far-right is mostly far-right in treatment of immigrants. Oh, let's face it, you know, we could begin to give them a bit of a run for their money here, but in terms of the welfare state and belief in it, it's nowhere near as far right as our Liberals. That probably wasn't what anyone asked, but anyway, there you are. Anybody else got a thought? Yeah, can you just bellow out, because I can't run this one.
I have a short, steward voice. Just a couple of things, just on education. I'm not a teacher, so don't blame me for this, but after COVID, we had an opportunity to change the education system here. And people were talking about going over to assessment exams and getting rid of this idea where your entire future can be decided on what your ability to sit for 3 hours and write. And we backed off. And we backed off not just because government backed off, but I would speak to people who, if I knocked their door and said I'm from the SNP, and they would tell me that they're pro-independence, threw up their hands in horror at the idea that there would be no exams in schools, that you could actually replace it with a system. And it seems to me that it's not just getting people centrally to accept we need a new system. It's getting people like in this room to accept that we need a different system for our children. And there are other places. My other home is 6,000 miles away in South Africa. And after we got rid of national Christian education in 1994, the education there is opened up. And kids go there at 6, 7. And there's a whole system of preschool and leading up to that. So I think what's actually needed is for us all to go and consider how, you know, that if we want those things, we actually have to fight for them, we actually have to raise them. But I wanted to ask you a question.
Jesus, is that not the question now?
Sorry. Yes. I'm not a fan of NATO. Of NATO. And I was quite upset when the Finns and the others joined NATO. I do understand why.
Yeah.
If you're the person with Russia on your doorstep, then clearly you've got a bigger threat than me sitting either in Johannesburg or in Wick, worried about it. But did you get any idea that there was anybody there who perhaps thought that as big a threat to world peace is the country that sits at the centre of NATO, the United States? Because that, to me...
But stop!
Sorry. is a problem.
No, it's just that I'm trying to stick this behind my ear, but my lug's not that big, you know. Well, to work it backwards, yeah. I mean, to be fair, it's not like, I think there was a big push to join NATO. It's not like there's pro-NATO demos in the street and everything. And you've got to say, these guys, their total outlook on life is that nobody helps you. And actually, that was true, because basically they were left to go swivel at the end of the Second War. And in fact, generally through their history, people have praised their determination and all that sort of stuff. When push has come to shove, they've actually been just bargained away, really, and so has most of Eastern Europe. So at the same time as they've joined NATO for all for one, one for all kind of protection stuff, they've got more protection themselves than any country on earth, practically. So yes, so it's extraordinary. And even it's things like food security. They've got the world's highest food security. So it's like they've gone through the whole thing to make sure they're never going to get wobbled. So America, now it's strange because you'll remember there was a black lad speaking there with a very American accent. I'm not too worried, I'm going to get all my grades and schools are great. You might think he's American. He's Finnish, right? But he's learnt English by watching American movies. So the thing is, for all countries, and it's not, we're no different, but those countries are using what they watch to learn English, and they're not learning English, they're learning American. So it's kind of bonding them, I think subliminally, without us even thinking it through, to a country, to behaviours that we don't identify with. I mean, I can't watch anything after about 10 o'clock at night generally, because it's basically men killing each other. And if you want to go to bed after that, knock yourselves out, but you probably can't. So, there's a whole Americanization going on, and that is probably culturally quite strong. But of course, they're hugely, one of their prime ministers, Marty Atahari, got the Nobel Peace Prize for managing to produce a peace settlement in Namibia, Southwest Africa. So they got a real reputation as being the great negotiators, the great conciliators. So the idea of somebody just deciding on a sort of whim that they don't like the look of Iran and they're going to bomb it to smithereens, that's nowhere in their repertoire at all. So, that's antithetical completely to how they work. And sort of one of the ways they work is all of these countries have had proportional representation for 100 years. So you put a couple of things together. I don't know if you noticed in the wake of the Civil War, how they ever managed to speak to each other, again, beats me. I grew up in Belfast, as you might hear, and we've not managed that. And that's a long time. And so within, 30 years, they basically were all able to join a national army for a country that essentially killed them, killed their parents. And that one of the reasons for it was that, the winners were good winners because they basically gave a lot of the reforms that the Reds had been fighting for. So that was one thing, helped along by other countries. But the main thing was they had local elections. Right? Who would imagine? But the thing was people had to kind of learn to literally eyeball one another. And this is, you have killed my parents. And we've got to run this town. And it strikes me, again, coming back to this local thing, what is the opposite then? It's here. It's never knowing what you're capable of because you're not trusted to make those decisions. And for those of you who are interested in independence in the room, and I guess it might be a few, I think this is the biggest obstacle to independence because these places have been modelling independence their entire lives because they've been doing it at local level. They've been beginning to understand they can run things. And if you look at here, we've lost all the ways that we used to run things. Okay, there's still crofters union branches and so on and grazing committees, but that's about it. Who's a member of a trade union in the room? Right, it used to be everybody. 67% in Finland, trade union members. And that's 50 to 67% is normal across, there. We're on 31% in Scotland and we're the highest in the UK. So, and then we don't have local councils, we're not learning how to do anything, actually. So would you have confidence, this, I think people, go back to kids. If kids learn through experience, are we different? And are we having experience of running a country, a city, a town, a village, anything? With 7.9 million cooperative memberships, if you're in Finland, you would probably be, you're sad enough to come out on a Wednesday night to watch a film about another country, so you've pre-selected as being councillor material, right? How many people are councillors here? Not community councillors, councillors. That is the average result. But that is shocking. I'm not meaning this judgmentally, I'm not a councillor either. But the point is, you're interested in your civic lives and everything, but nobody would think of being a councillor. So if this was in Finland, you would be a member of a cooperative, probably two, and you'd be helping to run it. You'd be helping to run your council, and you'd probably be running a school if you're a teacher.
Did you find that there are people more involved in politics of Finland?
No.
Through that?
Not necessarily. They're actually doing stuff, and actually I think now myself a bit, that we get quite involved in sort of abstractions because we're not doing practical running things as much. So of course they've got a lively, but they're not taking lumps out of one another, do you know? And if things do seem like, you know, the prison island that's the #1 tourist attraction, nobody is, I mean, I went there in 2007, Kenny McCaskill set up a prisons commission, I was on it, Henry McLeish chaired it. And I suggested we should go to Finland, because they, again, results-wise, they were doing pretty well. And they turned things around. They had one of the highest prison populations. And this is the other point I've forgotten to make so far, is how long-term their planning is. So they decided to take 40 years to turn it around. When I talked to Heikki about that waterfront in Helsinki, he said it'll take us 30 years, but we'll get all those docks out. And I thought, yeah, right, you know, nobody plans longer than 5 years here, so 30 years, you're having a giraffe. So I come back 30 years later, ba-boom. And when I'm talking to people about stuff, they've also changed men's health. They used to have worse men's health than us. And as you know, chaps, that's saying something. And they have completely come past us because of 40 years of planning how to get, you know, all sorts of education things going on, but it'll actually get everybody back to picking berries, which used to be part of national behaviour. So when you talk to anyone about their plans, they'll say, well, which one do you want? The 100-year plan? The 40-year plan? The 10-year plan? And you're just going, 100 years? But that's also, if you have sort of everybody's buy-in to something, you will end up that you don't keep chopping and changing. So it's just the final thing to say, really, is that we have the pendulum swinging all the time at British level. Okay, not so much in Scotland, but then it's just like the SNP forever here, but, you know, maybe not a bad thing. Anyway, you know, in Britain, the pendulum just keeps swinging. So, you know, one set of guys will undo what the other set of guys did, although actually nobody seems to be quite tough enough to undo Thatcherism, which would be the useful thing to undo, but anyway, there you are. Whereas these guys, in Helsinki Council, there is no opposition. So every political party has a role within Helsinki Council. And that way, same with Denmark. I mean, the Danes have had the same policy for 50 years, very relevant for us now, because in the oil crisis, the OPEC crisis of 1974, which I suspect some of us in this room can remember quite well, we're the people that kind of shut doors and switched lights off and we go out of rooms and everything because we remember that. But the Danes looked at that and thought, Jesus, we haven't got enough of our own energy reserves, so we're going to stop being dependent on OPEC and oil, imported oil. And that's when they got into wind. They took an executive decision. Are you Danish?
No, but once you stop talking, I want to say something.
Okay, no, just come in now.
No. You've just mentioned, you just touched on proportional representation, and I feel that that is actually a big deal that's missing here. One, with proportional representation, you can actually vote for the party with the sort of program that you as a voter agree on, and it's easier to choose your party to vote for rather than go for A or B this year and maybe B and A next year. It's and then the other, so I think it engages voters more because you choose from a party and that is going to do what you want them to do. And then the other thing is that the governing will always be a coalition, whether it's at council level or it's at government level, which means that, again, as a citizen, you are going to hear the discussions that these parties are having while they're in government, because they have to agree and they have to compromise.
Whereas here, where you have only one party in power, they suddenly spring something on you, which wasn't in their manifesto at all, but it's just come out. So you just feel a lot more distant from the government or the council or whoever you think is in power.
Yeah. Actually, there's a point which relates as well to something that was raised before, which was the thing about needing to get everybody, the point that was made over here, about needing to get everybody on board if you're going to start dismantling, for example, our attachment to exams. And the thing is, I'm afraid that for those of us who've lived in Britain, and we are living in Britain, we have British thinking. Now, I know this will offend and annoy a lot of people, but unless you've actually lived somewhere else, you cannot help but pick up the vibes of how this state works. And how it works is, it's extraordinarily top-down, it's very lacking in belief that people have any capacity, and it ends up producing structures like that, which basically go like a virus through everybody's thinking. So you get, I mean, Nicola Sturgeon, I think, introduced this test for 5-year-olds because she wanted to look as if Scotland wasn't going all sort of soppy just because they had an SNP government. And there'll be people who think, oh yeah, you know, we need to show that we're, you know, even if all the evidence goes in the opposite direction, there's still this belief in tough but fair, you know, all these kind of things that are the hallmark, actually, of how Britain operates. So if somebody wants to dismantle that thinking, I think they have to get in and out that. Because it's like, I don't know how many of you knew that thing, which I have found out from a group called Upstart, that most of the reasons that children go to school the age they do here is because of the Factories Act. Did you know that? Right, well, you know, how are you going to get a discussion going if key bits of why things are the way they are just like mysteries for everybody? So the PR thing is massively important, but it's kind of what it ends up doing. Because at the moment, if you were to say to people, PR is a great thing because it produces compromise. How strong does the word compromise sound? Very weedy. British thinking, oh, we don't like compromise. That's selling out and it's, you know, weak because you're kind of giving in and all this kind of stuff. So at the moment, for example, half the councils in England, even though they were elected by first past the post, uniquely, I think in the world, not even Belarus uses first past the post for local elections, right? So they're way off on their own with that one. But nonetheless, even though they did that for strong and stable government, there's another set of, you know, buzzword, they've ended up, half their councils have no overall control. So the great irony is, I must say, I'm laughing like a drain, is that all these people that hate each other and got elected on a, you know, we're not even standing beside them and breathing the same air and everything, are all stuck having to run these councils together. So one way or another, we're moving, I think, inexorably towards this. The only trouble is, look at even Reform. They were very pro-PR until it looked like they might win. Then, ooh, right, back we go. And I just want to say that, okay, it definitely enables citizens, but what it allows you to do, if I could just finish that Denmark thing, is that 50 years ago, the Danes decided they would keep petrol prices high and they would make the cost of importing cars prohibitively expensive. So they were going to switch their entire population to public transport and bikes. And that was a decision made 50 years ago by all political parties together. There have been 30 changes of government since then, and they haven't changed their minds on it, because when they all signed up to something, they don't welsh on the agreement they were in. Now that's worth its weight in gold, because that's where you get 100-year planning. And we can't do that because we haven't got this outlook, or this system, you know. Anyway, Christine, is anyone dying of heat in here? Yeah. I mean, we've got the doors parked open as well.
Well, I was just going to say about, you know, when the lady made the point about the elections, I think the whole evening, the thing I keep coming back to is, I mean, you talked about trust right at the beginning, and the whole thing about systems. It's not just in education that folk are kind of prevented from acquiring a sort of sense of responsibility and independence. I mean, where I work at the minute, it's the last thing that you're allowed to do is show any initiative. You know, and I think that is something that anybody that is my age, a bit younger, very young probably understands on a daily basis. You know, it's just that pure frustration at not knowing how to create leverage to make any damn difference. And I think what I do feel as I'm getting older is we seem to have come like in a full circle. Like my eldest sister was born just immediately post-war. That generation did benefit from the determination that my parents' generation had to just settle the hash, forget about all the war, take the best out of what they could do and bring up a family and create the systems to do that. But I could see, even in the art of my family, like I came along 12 years later, things changed drastically. And I've got a younger sister, things have changed drastically again. And I still, you know, have benefited from a lot of things that the welfare state has produced. But I also suffered from a lot of things that the welfare state introduced. If you didn't come from a family that had some academic or educational background, it was very hard to find your way if you were a timid little person from the Isles. And I can recognise that in a lot of the young folk here, that I think what I'm really getting down to is, rather than believing in systems, even politically, I think the reason we're all scunnered and switching off from, you know, the whole referendum debate is that we realise there's no magic switch. We have to actually sit down and talk about values. You know, it's values that are missing from all the systems we've got. It's values that are missing. The civic people that are directing how the systems that we have to abide by and work by and create benchmarking for and meet fucking awful, you know, very meaningless targets are completely detached from what's going on a daily basis. They're the last folk you'll see at a film like this. They're the last folk. They'll demonstrate interest, you know, when you tell them there's this, that and the other. But it's going nowhere, because either they're burned out and they're knackered at the end of a week and they don't have the time, or they've long ago given up hope and they're just clinging on to the idea of a pension at the end of what they've got. And I think we've just got to become a little bit bolder in imagining that we are not that individually important, that we have to take a hit sometimes for the greater good. And I think that's why, I think that's what the Finnish quality of life is about. It's not about, oh, they create really good jobs for us. We have to think about what kind of life do we want to lead? How do we want to bring our families up? And then what are the systems we need to bring that about? But we seem to upend the pyramid the whole time. And it just gets really exasperating.
So, I mean, for sure, but there was one thing. Who is the person who had another house 6,000 miles away in South Africa?
I don't have a house, but
No,
it's my
right. But you mentioned, interestingly, how things changed after, essentially, independence.
Yeah.
And, you know, the big thing, for example, the Finns are not the top of the educational league tables anymore. It's the Estonians. And the Estonians only became independent in 1991. And what they were doing up till then was they had been forced to do the Russian education system, and they pivoted within 10 years to totally adopt the Finnish system and then outdo them. So that the Estonians are actually the kind of, have a look on my YouTube thing, there's a film about Estonia. Those guys, when they were independent in 1991, the old people were eating grass. And they've become the Baltic tiger of Europe, you know. Now, I mean, I'm just meaning there's a moment that happens with, you know, with independence. I think you get enough energy and focus together to start to do these changes we're talking about. And actually, you know, we can start trying to have conversations about what kind of schools you want and where you want the power to lie in society, and it's talk to the hand. I mean, if you find this, I mean, I quite get that everybody is so exhausted and scunnered with kind of the level of just compression that you're having from on top. I'm producing these films, and there has not been yet a single MSP that's ever come to any of them. So it's kind of like, as you say, they are doing, and they're not even surprised. If I say to them, would you guys ever think that you might want to get off your blimmin' arses and come to these things like everybody else? And they're just like, but that's not, we're busy doing other things and keeping the show on the road.
That's a really important point, but there's a thing about the blame culture, you know, that if we just turn around and say we blame, and I suppose I've done it in the way that I've presented what I said, but everybody's looking for the person to solve the problem and the person to blame for what's gone wrong. But we're all, I mean, it's not, we're not all to blame in that. I hate that also, that kind of complicity thing where you're made to feel you're the author of your own downfall. But we are potentially, I think it's the long-term planning, like you said, having the confidence to realise it's probably, right, okay, let's stop.
Right, I can just get a sense of restfulness in the room, which I think is related to everybody going, is it this hot in Dubai? I don't know, but it's very possibly true, right? But the thing is, yeah, for sure, all of that stuff. But I mean, I'll say, I'm a great believer in, you know, you do actually get your structures right, and you'd be surprised what happens after that. So, for example, one of the reasons the Finns are where they are today is that one of the package of measures they did in 1918 was land reform. Yeah. Well, that was, they probably did that just out of it. Well, in fact, you know, the whites who realised they'd won the war but they were sort of losing the public, decided to go for land reform. That was massively important because, as it said in the film, Finland is just a big forest. So actually they produced all the wood pulp for the newspaper industry that was beginning to take off across the whole of Europe. Now, if that had been in Scotland and everybody basically owned trees, the Duke of Buccleuch would have made a fair few bob. You know, there'd be all the kind of, you know, all these guys would have made a bit of money, and their gillies would have made a few bob, and somebody else might have got tuppence. But because everybody owned land equally, all the Finns got money from that revolution, because, you know, from that. So that's where land reform is a real game changer for these guys. So the thing is, we haven't done any of this. We haven't done it. We're sitting with still the largest, estates, landowners in the world. We're sitting with the largest councils in the world. We're sitting with the least number of people involved actively in running anything, probably. Well, we'll give it with the world, but in Europe, probably. And then we're sitting having big beer-pulling discussions about what's wrong with us. Right.
There have been improvements in
Oh, come on. All right, go on, you go. Do you know, Andy Whiteman's done the maths, actually, and the number of people who own 1,000 acres in Scotland is smaller today than in 1872. But go on.
But they brought in legislation where communities can take over land. And it's possible now, it has happened in place.
I can be testimony to that. I've spent 8 years on the island as a trustee of the Isle of Egg Trust. Right? We're never going to get land sorted in Scotland going that slow with that amount of buyouts. For example, I know, because I was there, that egg cost £1.56 million in 1997. The estimate today is 32 million. And what you get from the Scottish Land Fund is a maximum of £1 million. How's there ever going to be another community buyout? There won't be. Sorry to rain on your parade, right? But for fuck's sake, we need to just get off this. And I mean, I'm a huge believer in community stuff. I spent my entire life doing these things. But that's why I can see up close that that's not the solution. What we do in Scotland is, if you basically put enough of your life into it, and it'll generally be 10 years, you can prove your community innocent, and you can take yourself out of the shittest set of systems that Europe has produced, and leave that system intact. And we've got to stop it. I don't know what we're frightened of, but we're quite a frightened bunch of people when it comes to saying this is just not fit for purpose anymore. And maybe, okay, when you go on holiday, I quite appreciate that you don't go and start quizzing people about their local government structures, you know. But I'm sad enough that I do. And, you know, we're out on a limb. Just like final one, the average size of a local council in Scotland is 175,000 people. The average size across the EU is 10,000 people. So we're not just like a wee bit off beam, we're way, way, way off there. And nobody's interested in changing this, so... Anyway, well look, enough. If you go bouncing out of this, I'd be delighted but surprised perhaps. But the point is, all these countries, you know, all the films that have been here, have had massive problems. You know, the Finns had killed one another. They created concentration camps for one another. And they managed to get to a situation where they changed the way they operated dramatically within 2 generations. So these things are possible, but as Suzanne's saying and others, you've got to start confronting some of the stuff that's just producing this weariness and a lack of ability, people to make their own decisions. So last thing to say is just, the film it's Lesley Riddoch, whatever the thing is, on YouTube. So it's on there if you want anybody else, or have a look at the new bit at the end. And if anybody's interested, most of the arguments I've been going through here are in a book I wrote called Thrive, that's at the back if anybody wants to get their Christmas presents in early, for example. But anyway, otherwise, thanks to Mary again, and thank you for coming out tonight.